So it's a great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, which is Mr. Frank Meehan. Frank is an investor and an active entrepreneur. He's part of the team of Horizons Venture Capital that has a preference, I've seen, for Swedish startups. So all of you that are here, you should really approach Frank. They've invested in Spotify and Skype. They've also invested quite early on in Facebook and Siri, which was, of course, sold to Apple. So Frank will today talk about focus and delivery in the startup jungle. So without further ado, please, a warm welcome for Mr. Frank Meehan.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning, early Saturday morning, and which is very, very unusual for a conference. Only in Stockholm would I end up doing a conference at 9:30 on a Saturday morning. Absolutely fantastic, and it is, without a doubt, as Jesper said, Sweden and Stockholm is one of our absolute favorite places in the world to invest. In fact, I actually came here, my path started here in '92 when I came here as a student and did my last year of engineering at Kortehor, which is the Royal Technical Institute of Technology here, and it was an amazing experience, and I just got hooked on Sweden right there and then. And it is an amazing place. We have always liked investing here, and there's a lot of very good reasons for it. One is there's this incredible drive in Sweden to go global, to think global and to think big, and it's very rare, right? And it goes all the way back to the Ericsson and the ABB and the Saab days and the Volvo days, and just these big corporations, Electrolux. So many of these corporations just went big and global out of this little country of 9 million people. And that mentality still keeps going and going and going. It really is fascinating. And that drive to think big, to think global, and that is, pretty much what I'm going to concentrate on today in the little chat that I'm going to have here today. And there's also something that I discovered very early on in Sweden that I really liked. I found when I came here, obviously not able to speak the language, but I found that you could have a conversation with someone for a number of hours in Swedish just by using different variations of agreeing to something. Just det, precis, absolut, ja. It was incredible. I had the most amazing conversations and agreed to a lot of things, I think, in those early days. And it was I like languages. I've never come across a language that has so many different words of agreeing with something. And but it's that consensus-driven approach that probably comes out of that language that is also a massive thing. And I think there's something in that big network, consensus-driven, let's all work on something together, that is really, really powerful as well. And I think that when we come down to it, one of the things that I'm just gonna really talk about today is I'm just going to talk about some of the people that I've been lucky enough to meet or to work with over the years. And let's say I think some of the names will be familiar to you. And I'm just going to some of the great little things that they've said. And I'm actually I've just picked out from each one of them a tweet that they've sent over the last few years, and I'm just going to show that tweet because each one of those tweets really encapsulated something very important that person wanted to say, and I think it's really, really valuable. So, Eric, without it, if we just go straight to the first one. Oh, of course. What, I've got to go and press this thing, don't I? All right, there we go. Right. So the first one. Daniel Ek. Daniel is amazing. I mean, I was very, very lucky and very privileged to be on the board of Spotify from the early days. And Daniel has this amazing drive that actually, we saw that Nicholas Enstrom and Skype had as well, which is I'm going to change the world. I'm going to do something that is really focusing on a basic human need that isn't really satisfied yet, which was we all love listening to new music and we all like sharing music pretty much, but the existing system didn't work. And it's the same thing with Skype. Everybody loves to talk, and man, do they like to talk for free. So just again, this basic human need. If I was to say one thing, try and get something. If you're working on something, try and remember what is the basic human need that you are satisfying by doing this work, that you've got this product, that is really going to make the sweet spot. So what's Daniel tweeted up here? He's tweeted for, I put it so you can concentrate here at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday. I'm a lucky guy. Don't get me wrong, I work insanely hard, but when you love what you do, you go the extra mile. Don't settle, right? That's super, super important. You gotta love what you do. If you end up like for some reason, something you just don't love what you're doing, and sometimes that comes from a lot of different things, and it could be like, you know, there's too many advisors, the investors you think are not going in the right direction for you. But, you know, you got to fix that and fix it quickly. You got to love what you do and go the extra mile. And Daniel, from the early days of Spotify, just out of here to the global force it's become today, he's just really always been positive. He's always believed in it. And no matter what, and it was really, really hard in some of the early days with before the US launch. But every single day, he really believed and really pushed it, and he just loved what he did. And that goes through all of the successful entrepreneurs. And it's the same thing. You know, I've really pretty much loved everything I've done over the years. And when I didn't, I moved on from it pretty quickly. So I think that's just one of the things I've learned over the path is, you know, work insanely hard, definitely, but love what you do. It really makes you go the extra mile. The second thing is, well, you know, obviously the new billion dollar man. So Kevin Systrom from Instagram. So Kevin's done an amazing thing. He satisfied a basic human need. There was lots of stuff out there, you know, Photoshop, etc. And he just figured out, right, people love to share photos. It really doesn't exist. Let's get it out there onto the iPhone. But the thing that he did really, really well here was that he really focused on, not only did he focus on a basic human need, but he also really focused on his distribution platform. At that time, you know, when Instagram launched, and this is from the 6th of October, 2010, right? So this is day 2 of Instagram launching out into the iOS store, and it was already number 2 in the photography section. It had gone with a rocket, and it went with a rocket because Apple loved it right out of the gate. And I think that one of the important things as well is your distribution network. You know, you got to think about like, what is your distribution network? And over the years, I've worked on a lot of different networks, and distribution networks change all the time. But one of the things is, what is the best way of getting to your audience the quickest? And if you're not on that, find out, ask yourself why. Why aren't I on the best way of getting my product to the audience, and the quickest and the fastest? And what they did as well is that they got Apple's attention. And I have to say that if everyone here is you know, whatever you're doing, and if you are in the app business, you've really got to think about where your real target is. Really the what's hot section in the App Store. Because the Apple guys are amazing. They're very, very good. They know what is good and they know what is right for their customer. And if you get into the what's hot section, right, you're going to boom. It's just fantastic. And so you really focus on how am I going to get there? How do I get attention, right? Remember, it's very, very little amount of detail that I can get noticed in the App Store. So to cut through, you've got to get into that. And that's what they did. And by doing that, bam, off they went. And you can see that again and again and again. When you get there, you have this amazing marketing tool that kicks you off. The third one I was going to have a talk about is Dave Morin from Path. So I love Path. I don't know if you guys have, Path hasn't really cut it into Sweden yet, but it is really, really taking off in San Francisco and London and a few other places. Path is a new social network, but it's absolutely just on mobile, and it is amazing on mobile, and it is fantastic. It is the best way to stay in touch on mobile. And people are just gravitating towards it because it's fast and it's really, really good. But Path pivoted. They pivoted. It was going along like this for about a year, and it just really wasn't going that far. And Kevin just took the team aside, went back to the fundamentals of what he was doing, and pivoted, and immediately it just went, to a great success. And again, so one of the things I've learned over the years is that you got to adapt. You got to adapt, and you've got to think, okay, this is just not going anywhere, and if it really is just going like this and it's not really, there's something there fundamental that is right, but there's something that's just got to get tweaked. And what was really interesting about Path is the way that it was done. So the tweaks were just small tweaks, small bits of magic. It doesn't have to be a lot. Don't overdo it. Like, it's just small bits of magic in the UI that made an enormous bit of difference. And people just going, wow, just look at this. It just does this. And that was it. And everyone just loved it. So, and it's a focus on a detail, focus on like 1 or 2 or 3 little details that just make the magic. You don't have to do a lot of magic. You just got to get things that just slightly different. People try to do too much. And with and what Dave did with Path and pivoting Path is amazing, and it's unbelievable. It's going so well, and he's focused very, very heavily on a mobile experience. And you guys are all coming up into a startup area, and I have to say, there's a lot of businesses that can be disrupted by just utterly focusing on mobile. Don't try and do everything. Don't try and do the web. And the mobile. Don't try to do too many different platforms. Just focus on one, get it right, and if it works, then go further. It's the same thing with Instagram, right? Just on iOS for a very, very long time, and that was fine. It worked beautifully. They didn't get distracted by going out and building a whole bunch of Android ones. Now, don't get me wrong, Android's fantastic, but it would have distracted them from where they were. They started an Android, then they focused on Android. If they start on iOS, then you focus on iOS. Just focus on a platform that you start with. The next tweet was back to Kevin again. So just, this is only a few days after he'd launched Instagram out there. And remember, there was very, very few of them. And even when they sold, there's very few of them. And so, they kept it tight and they kept it very focused. And one of the really key things there that I think is super important is he says, I'm learning the power of keeping things simple in code. Like, rarely is it a good idea to overthink or engineer a problem. And that, man, is that true, right? I've been guilty in the past of overthinking and over-engineering a problem. And I learned from it. And I've always, tried to keep it simple at the start. And even then, try and keep it simple all the way through, but certainly at the start. And I think one of the fundamental lessons that I could say is that try and build something first. Try and prototype something first and get something out there so that you've got something, and keep it simple and keep it focused. And again, and you really, it's so, I know you say it over and over again, but the temptation to put more features into something, the temptation to go, oh wow, if we only did this, we did this, and brainstormed this, it really happens, right? You start off thinking, yeah, I'll keep it simple, and then suddenly it all just gets a little bit too big, right? So just this tweet is gold, because Instagram became $1 billion company because Kevin kept it focused. Right from that time, all the way through, he kept it focused. He didn't let it get out of control. Alexander Jung, SoundCloud. Alex is amazing. I mean, coming up with a concept of, like, I believe in the power of sound, right? Okay, good. There's a lot of investors that just went, wow, okay. But he believed, right? And he went through it. And it's the same thing with Daniel and Spotify. Like, I'm going to make this whole thing with the labels work. Yeah, right. Yeah, no one's really done that before. But he did, right? And the power of getting it done and getting his idea across. But Alex has said something here that's really, really crucial here, I think, this tweet. So, a strong desire to organize but being able to cope with the unorganized is crucial if you want to live life in the startup lane. It's really important, right? I mean, you come out and you've maybe just come out of school, and you've come out of a structured environment. You might have come out of a corporate, might have come out of another business, and wow, the startup world is not structured in that way. Things go, you've got to go with the flow. Don't let it get to you. I've seen a lot of people over the years let it get to them and start to take things personally and think that it's all out of control, and it's just that. Don't take it personal, and especially the ability to roll with things, the ability to cope with the unorganized is crucial, especially when you're small and you're thinking, okay, I've got to go out and I've got to talk to partners, and maybe those partners are not as organized as I want them to be. I've got to be patient, and I've got to work it through, and I've got to stick at it, and I've just got to get it through, and I'll get them there. I've seen people just walk away, and I've just, it's too hard type of problem. You got to stick to it and get it through. And I'm going to finish with a tweet from just a great friend of mine, Shakil Khan, who was right from the early days of Spotify, ran different projects for Spotify, and was so influential and crucial in a lot of ways for Spotify. And what Shaq did is that he was an amazing networker. And from the very early days, right, when Spotify was here in Sweden, and Shaq was given the mission, right, let's go and see if we can get some noise in the US. So he goes over to LA. There's hardly anyone over in LA and New York, right? He's this guy out of Sweden, this tiny little startup in Sweden, and he just got everybody into it. And it was amazing. I mean, the power of what he did was incredible. And his ability to build a network is so successful, and it's so crucial. It's just this ability to go out there, network, and get to meet people. And now he's just joined Path, and Dave Morin, and he's going to go out and do the same thing with Path. And he's gone, Shaq is a great journey. He's gone from London to Spotify to Path, and from when I met him, a few years ago to now, where the fact that he joined Path was a big story in San Francisco, in VentureBeat and TechCrunch. It's like a massive thing for Shaq to join Path, and that's amazing. I mean, and that was the sheer power of his ability to network and keep things going. And I was just having a chat here to the two ladies who are coming up after me, and how they were just telling me how they've got out to San Francisco from Iceland and gone into San Francisco and networked in San Francisco. And I do think that is super crucial, right? It's really important that you draw upon the talent out of here in Stockholm. And look at what Spotify's done. Daniel's kept it here in Stockholm, which is an amazing thing, because he knows the talent is really, really good here. But you've got to get out to the valley in some ways and network, because it is really amazing. However, I do think, then, this is one of the reasons that we invest here in Sweden, is because it's one of the very, very few places in the world where literally there's so many people doing something. I was out last night in Stockholm, and I ran into, during various hours, I ran into 4 other people doing startups, and there we are, like, having this amazing debate about, like, the various merits of our various startups and what we're doing. And honestly, there's nothing like that any other places. Only 2 other places I know that I see that happen. That's in San Francisco and in Israel, in Tel Aviv. So that draw upon that here and draw upon that network and get it out there is fantastic. And I'd just like to say that on this way here, it's been a fantastic journey. It's been a privilege, and I'm still having an enormous amount of fun. And so that's the thing I'd like to end with. Just remember, have fun and really, really enjoy what you're doing. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Frank, for a very interesting talk. And I'll just throw a few questions at you. So you kind of started and ended with a few Swedish or Stockholm things here. So you started with Daniel Ek from Spotify, and now you said, you know, Stockholm is such an interesting place. You meet so many people just being out doing things. So what is the significance of the Swedish startup scene, and how do you see it as an investor more than this?
Well, I mean, I rarely do conferences, and I'm up here for this one because I think the startup scene in Stockholm is amazing. It has this drive to do things globally, right? I come back to that point I made about Nicholas and Daniel and you know other Swedes who've always just thought, hey man, we only got 9 million people here. We have to think globally. And also what's really interesting here as well from an investor's viewpoint, particularly ours, is there isn't that much of that flip mentality that exists in the Valley. So in the Valley, there's a lot of companies that are just built to get bought by Facebook and Google, etc. That's their philosophy. But there's not really, I mean, that doesn't exist here, right? So you've got to build something that is big to get noticed.
Yeah.
And that mentality, that's really attractive.
And also you were talking a lot about kind of the vision and being able to actually present that vision. So is that something that you, like, are Swedes good in that actually, kind of being bold and stating that vision?
Yeah, I think so, in a very direct and simple way.
Yeah.
But which is good as well, right? You know, Swedish presentations don't often get complicated.
Yeah.
I've never seen a complicated Swedish presentation. It's usually very precise.
Very good. So I think the second tweet was the guy from Instagram.
Kevin, yeah.
Kevin. So I just learned that Facebook had acquired Instagram last week for, I think, $1 billion. And I've seen it's been quite debated afterwards. So can you tell us something on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, that was because what Instagram did was a very, very good mobile play. It's all about mobile now. And they had the absolute lead in a mobile imaging experience. You know, it is incredible. You know, pretty much the same week that Instagram sold for $1 billion, Kodak went bankrupt, right? So that change is incredible. But there's going to be that Instagram effect is now drawing a lot of other things along.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks a lot,
No
Frank.
worries,
and before you leave, please take a book. So the presents are going to be stories, basically. So, I mean, you just shared a story. So we kind of want to give a story back. And I want you to stay, actually, because I'm going to bring up the next speakers, which are really experienced interviewers, you could say. So we'll see if they have one last question. So I think we'll just first give a warm round of applause for Frank again.
Thanks, guys.
And then it's a great pleasure to introduce two Icelandic entrepreneurs, Vala Halldórsdóttir and Cecilia Williamsdóttir, that have directed something called the Startup Kids, where you've basically gone to the US and Europe and interviewed like 70 different entrepreneurs. So this is what you're going to tell us about today. But first, before you kind of start, do you have a question for Frank that I kind of missed?
Yeah, we are also interested in, when we meet investors, to hear what's the craziest pitch you've ever gotten?
What's the craziest?
Yeah.
What's the craziest pitch I've ever got? Wow, that's a really interesting question. I would say that. Well, I'll tell you what the craziest pitch that my boss ever got, right? Which is really interesting. So Li Ka-shing is a massive investor around the world, and here in Sweden, right? And so he owned and owns and started a lot of massive mobile operating companies, right? And then Nicholas Enström turns up back in the very early days of Skype and says, look, I'm pitching this idea about a new way for people to talk, right? And it's free, right? We're going to do voice for free, right? So you can imagine any other operator would have kicked him out the door, right? And said, right, get out of here and, no way, right? But Mr. Lee said, right, that's pretty cool, right? So even though I've got this operator business, I got to understand you guys are going to be a success. I have to understand what you are going to do, right? Even at, and so so invested, and in the end, we built a thing called the Skype phone, and it was insanely profitable for us. I used to work in the operator side as an operator. So that ability to think, wow, I've got this huge investment here, but I need to understand what this is because it will affect this, and I need to make it work. You know, that's pretty cool. So I'd say that was pretty crazy of him to actually go for it, really. Good.
Nice.
Thanks a
guys.
lot.
Good luck.
Great. And here.